about something completely different. School exclusions and a report done by a former Education Minister, Edward Timpson, which is looking at schools' accountability for the pupils that they permanently exclude. Let's listen to this from Damien Hines, the Education Secretary.
We're going to respond to this report in a number of different ways, including tightening up our guidance to schools, but also taking up the biggest single recommendation, which is around changing the accountability system, so that as it were, the outcomes for kids who are expelled stay with the school. So everybody's everybody's aligned in the same way for the future of that child.
Do you agree? Do you welcome that policy idea?
I do. I mean, I actually look at this through the lens of social workers who deal with a lot of these children. I chair a charity called Frontline for social work. And what we know is that a child who's already involved with social services is between 2 and 4 times more likely to be excluded. So, in a way, at the moment, we're just piling disadvantage onto disadvantage. Now, I think schools have to be able to exclude because some of these children are very challenging. But we have not done right by these children, and I think that idea that you must have accountability in the system is right, because otherwise you're just losing sight of some of the most vulnerable children.
Should schools be made accountable for the pupils they do exclude, in the sense that their future exam results would be included in any league tables for that school?
I think absolutely yes, and some of this follows on from the Education Select Committee report on off-rolling. It was a few months ago. I sit on that committee.
Well, off-rolling, of course, is illegal, because
yes,
that's actually getting rid of pupils because they are, I don't know, getting poor grades, rather than a threat, perhaps, to other pupils.
What comes from the Timpson report is that issue that there are schools who are doing that. You have to separate the two, exclusions and off-rolling. There is a place for exclusions, I totally agree, in some scenarios. But if you are excluding or off-rolling pupils in order to improve your Ofsted rating through grades, that's absolutely wrong. And making them accountable will both act as a disincentive for that, but also make sure those kids don't get lost in the system and end up an increasing number of children homeschooled, but without actually being homeschooled, if you know what I mean.
But what about the responsibilities on schools? I mean, is it fair to put more accountability and responsibility on schools who are already burdened with a whole range of things they have to do?
You can't simply keep piling responsibilities on the schools without setting up some means for them to deal with these extremely difficult children who do need attention. Now, part of the government statement was to look after the mental health of children and put more money into support systems which allowed such children, who are often very disturbed, to have care that they need, so that they don't need to be just simply excluded and abandoned, but can be within the school system, treated in a particular way that helps them out of their problem. It takes money to do that.
And presumably this recommendation would also make it more likely that another school is willing to take these difficult pupils on, and they're not going to be lumbered with the thought, they're going to get bad exam results. The only thing is whether there's any time limit on this. I don't know in terms of, I haven't read Timpson's report, but I mean, is it right that somebody who was excluded at the age of 11 or 12, say, their school should be lumbered with their poor A-level results at the age of 18?
Hope that they'd find an alternative placement somewhere before they reached 18.
Yeah, but I mean, under this system, the first school would still be that they would.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. They need to be placed somewhere else in order for that. But there's another couple of factors that lead into this. One is Ofsted changes in the way that they're going to assess, and they're going to look less at exam results and more about quality of care and teaching, which is positive and will help with that same thing. And the other side of it is what happens after children are excluded.
Right.
And the standard of alternative provision. Are we setting people up to fail, or are we putting them in a positive intervention?
Well, Ben, it's your government, of course, that has been in charge for quite a long time, and actually the reports on the standard of care from pupil referral units or to alternative provision is very mixed. It's not of a high enough standard. Is it fair to ask schools to take more responsibility for their most difficult pupils without having already put more funding and resources into that alternative provision?
Well, I've been on this show before with you, Joe, and said that I do think there needs to be more funding and resources.
Yeah, but why has nothing been done? You're a Tory MP, you're on the Education Select Committee. You're throwing your hands up, but, you know, what are we to think?
I think there needs to be a much higher priority, and I hope that the spending review will reflect that in the summer. But I think there are a number of these issues. Special educational needs, another one, which links into alternative provision and exclusions, that is a much bigger issue than is given credit for in the media because of Brexit and because that sucks the atmosphere out.
But also, simply piling it on schools and school budgets and so on doesn't adequately answer the cuts to youth services generally out in the community. family. And many of these young people who are out there committing knife crimes and so on have been excluded, and there are no youth provisions to cater for them.
Right, well, and that's exactly what's been covered by The Independent. Knife crime rise linked to youth service cuts, parliamentary report finds. Do you accept that? It's cuts that have contributed to this rise in knife crime?
I think certainly a lack of services in some places. We've seen both with the schools element and in youth services. There are some places that have managed it much better than others. There are some examples of some fantastic third sector organisations. In Mansfield, we've got third sector charitable youth services that are fantastic. But there's certainly a gap there. Again, I sit on the all-party parliamentary group for youth services that made recommendations that there must be a statutory youth service to government.
I mean, the statistics are high. Some councils cut funding for youth workers and clubs by 91% in 3 years. Is it a surprise that it's had an impact in terms of children's behaviour and levels of crime?
No, it's not a surprise, but on the other hand, if the 91% were restored, I wouldn't be surprised either whether the knife crime was not totally reduced. In other words, it's only one factor, and that there are obviously lots of other factors as well. And there's a danger of saying this problem would go away if only we restored the cuts.
I mean, people may be asking, why are children permanently excluded? If we put aside the off-rolling, the idea that some schools, and it's a small number, might be permanently excluding on the basis